I want you to try something with me. It's a visualization exercise, but I want you to try and hear it. So if you can, just close your eyes for a second and imagine a sound, a rhythmic, mechanical, just an absolutely relentless sound.
Okay.
Clack whoosh, over and over again. It is the sound of a massive, just enormous industrial loom.
A loom. That's a very specific image to start with.
It is, and it's deliberate because it's the central metaphor for what we are unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into a really, I think, challenging and fascinating piece of work by J.R. Ahmed, specifically his book, The Quran and Atheism, and there's a chapter in it called The Tapestry of Being.
Right.
And he uses this image, this cosmic loom, to describe the universe as, well, as modern science tends to understand it.
It creates a very stark mental picture, weaving, threads crossing over other threads, creating a pattern.
Exactly. But in this particular image, the threads aren't, cotton or silk. Every single thread is a stream of atoms. Every pattern that you see emerge is a chemical reaction. And the motion of the loom itself, that clack whoosh that's driving the whole thing.
And it would be the laws of physics.
The laws of physics, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces, the engine, really, of reality itself.
Yeah.
And Ahmed, he opens this chapter with a short poem that really, I think, sets the stakes for this entire conversation. It goes like this. The physicalist strides, with matter as his guide, declaring all that is in atoms does abide. This cosmic loom, a causal chain so tight, where only matter holds the boundless right.
Where only matter holds the boundless right. That's a heavy claim. It's poetic, sure, but it's actually a very, very rigorous philosophical statement.
And that is our starting line for today. Our mission in this deep dive is to explore the tension between two profoundly different ways of seeing this loom. On one side, you have the universe of blind atoms, the mechanical loom just weaving itself in the dark. And on the other side, we have this counterproposition that we're going to untack from the source material. A multidimensional reality. A reality where the loom isn't the whole story, but maybe, just maybe, it's only the canvas for something else.
And I think this is such a vital conversation to have, because we usually get this wrong. When people debate science versus religion or atheism versus theism, they usually end up arguing about the furniture in the room.
The furniture? What do you mean?
Did the Red Sea actually split? Is evolution compatible with Scripture? Who wrote this book? Who wrote that book?
Right. We get stuck in the weeds of specific historical claims or interpretations.
We do. But Ahmed is asking us to zoom out. Way, way out. He's not taking us to the main floor. He's taking us down to the basement level, to the foundation. Oh. The ontology.
Ontology, okay, that's the big $10 word for the study of what actually exists.
Precisely. Before we can even begin to argue about miracles or prophets, we first have to agree on the nature of the stage we are standing on. And the dominant ontology of our time, it is the water we swim in, it's the air we breathe in the university and the laboratory, is what Ahmed defines as philosophical materialism. Or you'll also hear it called physicalism.
Okay, so let's steelman this. Let's give this worldview its proper due, because it's not some random idea. This is the engine that built the modern world. The source material defines physicalism with a few very hard, very specific rules. And the first one is what it calls the ontological primacy of the physical.
Which is really just a fancy way of saying matter is king.
Okay, break that down for us. What does that actually mean, matter is king?
It is the core assertion that reality is exclusively composed of matter, energy, and the physical laws that govern them. That is it. Full stop.
Nothing else on the menu.
There's no secret menu to the universe, no hidden dimensions, no spirits, no ghosts, no non-physical entities of any kind that are independent of that physical universe.
Yeah. So if I can't weigh it or measure it or pour it into a beaker or, smash it in a particle accelerator,
then in a fundamental sense, it does not exist.
Right.
It might be a concept in your head or an illusion your brain is creating or a particular chemical state, but it is not a thing in its own right.
So in this worldview, the cosmic loom is all there is. It's a self-weaving loom. There is no weaver standing behind it, guiding the threads.
And this is the absolutely crucial part. There is no room for a weaver. This leads us to the second and honestly the most intellectually formidable concept the source discusses. It's called the causal closure of the physical.
Okay, I have to admit, this was the part of the reading where I had to just stop and stare at the wall for a minute, because it is a tight argument.
It's incredibly tight. It's like an intellectual vault. It's sealed.
So causal closure, it basically says that every single physical event must have a physical cause. Let's trace this out. If I raise my hand right now, okay, so my hand is up in the air, That event was caused by a muscle contracting in my shoulder.
Correct. A purely physical event. And that muscle contraction was itself caused by an electrical impulse traveling down your nerve.
Another physical event. And that impulse, in turn, was caused by a chemical firing in a neuron deep in my motor cortex.
And that neuron firing was caused by a previous electrochemical state in your brain, which was influenced by, who knows, the sugar levels in your blood from the coffee you drank, or a photon of light hitting your eye.
And if we keep tracing this chain of physical causes backward,
if you had a supercomputer big enough and you knew the state of every particle, you could trace that chain of custody all the way back. From your hand, to your brain, to your breakfast, to the formation of the Earth, to the forging of elements in stars, and eventually right back to the Big Bang.
it's a completely unbroken chain, a closed loop of dominoes falling one after the other.
Exactly. Now, here's why that is so devastating. For any concept of the supernatural or a God in this specific worldview, and you have to listen closely to this part, if you introduce a soul or a God that decides to step in from the outside and, let's say, nudge a single atom to make a neuron fire that wouldn't have fired otherwise, what have you just done?
You've interfered. You've broken the chain.
You've broken the chain. You have introduced energy into the system from outside the system. You have just violated the first law of thermodynamics, the conservation of energy. In a strictly materialist universe, the room is sealed. There are no windows, there are no doors, no outside interference is possible.
So the closed room argument is that there is literally no space, no gap for God to put a finger in and change things.
Correct. If a ghost moves a coffee cup across a table, physics as we understand it is broken. And since we operate on the fundamental assumption that physics is not broken, we are forced to conclude that ghosts do not exist.
It feels, I mean, the word that comes to mind is claustrophobic, isn't it? But at the same time, I can totally see why it's so seductive. It's safe, it's predictable. If the universe is a closed room, then in theory, we can measure everything in the room. We can master the room.
That is the great appeal. It gives us a sense of control. If there are no unpredictable spirits meddling with the machinery, then we can figure out exactly how the machine works, and then we can drive it. This mindset, let's be fair, gave us antibiotics. It gave us the internet. It gave us space travel.
But the source is quick to point out that this rigorous, unbending logic demands a price. And that price is that it leads inevitably to reductionism.
The idea that complex things are, at their core, nothing more than piles of simple things. The whole is never greater than the sum of its parts.
Right. So we look at the Mona Lisa. We see a masterpiece of art filled with sorrow and mystery and genius. The reductionist is forced to say, no, it is just pigment, oil, and a cracked canvas. We see a human being in love sacrificing everything for their child.
And the reductionist sees biological drives, kin selection to pass on genes, and a cocktail of dopamine and oxytocin spiking in the brain.
A complex output playing a physical part, just like the poem said.
And this is where the rubber meets the road for you, the listener. Because if you accept the materialist premise, if you accept that the loom is all there is, that the room is sealed, you have to accept the conclusions that come with it. You can't just pick and choose. You can't just take the science and leave the philosophy on the shelf.
And the source lists those conclusions out, one by one, and they are stark. They strip the paint right off the walls of reality.
They do. First, let's look at the big one. Consciousness.
Yeah.
Your mind. In this view, your thoughts, your feelings, your deep sensation of being you, that is just an emergent property. The source uses the analogy of wetness.
Wetness, how does that work?
Well, think about a single water molecule, an H2O molecule. Is it wet?
No, I guess not. It's just a molecule.
Right. It has no property of wetness. But if you get enough of them together, billions and billions of them, the property of wetness emerges from their interaction. In the same way, a single neuron in your brain isn't conscious, it isn't thinking, but you stack 100 billion of them together in a specific way.
And you emerge.
The sensation of you emerges. You are, in this view, a biological exhaust fume, an intricate illusion created by the machine.
That is bleak. Okay, what about morality? What is right and wrong?
In a closed system, in a universe of blind atoms, morality can only be one of two things. Either it's an evolutionary strategy that got coded into our DNA.
So we don't kill each other because it's bad for the survival of the species as a whole.
Exactly. Or it's a social contract, a pragmatic agreement. We all got together and said, look, this will work better for everyone if we agree not to steal and murder, so let's make a rule. It's not because murder is objectively, cosmically wrong in the fabric of the universe.
So let's follow that logic. If the Nazis had won the Second World War and they had successfully created a global society where they decided that genocide was good for the survival of their species, within a purely materialist framework, you can't really stand up and say they are wrong in some absolute cosmic sense.
You can't. You can only say you disagree with their survival
That's the
strategy.
thing.
There is no standard of justice outside of the human mind to appeal to. It doesn't exist.
And purpose, the meaning of life.
Self-created, you make it up. The universe itself is blind, deaf, and dumb. It has no purpose. It doesn't know you're here, and it certainly doesn't care that you are.
This all culminates in the God of the gaps scenario. I hear this argument all the time. The idea is that God is just a fallacy we invented to explain things we didn't understand. Like, we invented a God to explain lightning before we knew about atmospheric electricity.
Exactly. I don't know how this works, so a magic man in the sky must have done it. And the argument goes that as science advances, as we learn more, the gaps in our knowledge get smaller and smaller, so God gets squeezed into these tinier and tinier corners of our ignorance until eventually there are no gaps left, and he just vanishes completely.
So that's the empiricist proposition. And I want to be really clear, we aren't setting this up just to knock it down like some kind of straw man. This is a fortress. It's a powerful, sturdy, rational framework.
It is a fortress.
But
Here comes the but.
every fortress has walls, and by definition, walls define limits. And this is where J.R. Ahmed pivots the entire conversation. He isn't here to argue that atoms aren't real. He's not here to say the loom doesn't exist. He's asking a much more subtle, and I think a much more dangerous question. Is the loom limited?
This is where the rationalist enters the chat, so to speak. We aren't debating the existence of the weaving anymore. We are now debating the size of the tapestry. Precisely. Let's talk about the box. We spent all this time establishing that the materialist box is tight. It's sealed shut. But the source introduces a concept that doesn't just open a window of the box. It blows the walls clean off.
Yeah.
And that concept is Al-Ghaib.
Al-Ghaib. Okay, so that translates loosely from Arabic to the unseen.
Yes. Now, I want to be very, very careful here, and the source is very careful too, because when we hear a phrase like the unseen or the supernatural, our modern skeptical brains, they immediately jump to fairy tales.
Right. Magic wands, Harry Potter, ghosts in sheets. We think of things that are irrational by definition.
Exactly. We think of things that violate logic. Magic is usually just our word for breaking the known rules. But the source argues that Al-Ghaib is a logical necessity, not some kind of magical loophole. It's not about irrationality. It's about scale and perception.
Okay, explain that. How can something be unseen but also completely rational?
Well, think about the human instrument, your body, your eyes, your ears, your brain. We are biological machines that are, designed to survive on the plains of Africa. We evolved to spot lions in the tall grass and to find ripe fruit on a tree. That's what we're built for.
Right, we aren't built to see quantum fields or comprehend 11 dimensions.
Not at all. Take our vision. We see a tiny, tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. We call it visible light. But we know through science that on either side of that little sliver, there's a vast reality. There is infrared, there's ultraviolet, there are X-rays, gamma rays, radio waves.
I know for a fact that UV light is real because I can get a sunburn from it, but I can't see it. If I didn't have a scientific instrument to detect it, I would have no idea it was there.
Okay, now think about this. The mantis shrimp.
The shrimp. Where are we going with this?
The mantis shrimp has 16 different types of color receptors in its eyes. Humans, we have 3, red, green, and blue. That little shrimp looks at a coral reef and sees a psychedelic explosion of color and data that you and I literally cannot imagine. We do not even have names for those colors.
So to me, those colors are Ghaib. They are unseen.
Exactly. But does the fact that you can't see them mean they don't exist?
No, of course not.
Does it mean they're magic or supernatural?
No. It just means my receiver, my eyes, aren't built to catch that particular signal.
This is the core of the argument. Al-Ghaib represents the dimensions and the truths that are currently beyond human word and our current scientific instrumentation. The materialist makes the profound mistake of thinking that what I can measure equals what exists, and that is an arrogance of the instrument.
It's like a thermometer saying, I can't measure humidity, therefore humidity is a myth.
Precisely. The source is arguing that reality is fundamentally suprasensory. It's bigger than our tools. And the source uses the analogy of time to really drive this home. This is a fantastic way to visualize what Ghaib actually means. Think about the future.
Okay, the future.
To you, right now, sitting in this studio, is tomorrow real? Does it exist?
I mean, I assume it will happen. I have plans for tomorrow, but no, I can't see it. I can't touch it. I can't measure it. I can't send a probe to tomorrow and bring back a soil sample.
To you, the future is Ghaib. It is unseen. It is hidden from you behind the veil of time. But now imagine a being, let's call it a transcendent sovereign, or Allah as the source does, who is not inside the timeline like we are. Imagine a being who exists outside of time altogether.
Like a person looking down at a map spread out on a table.
That's the perfect analogy. If you are an ant walking along the line of a road drawn on the map, you can only see the paper that is right in front of your antenna. That's your present. The rest of the road ahead is the future. It's unseen. But to the person standing above the table, the entire map is visible at once. The beginning, the middle, and the end.
So for that being, for the one looking at the map, my tomorrow is a clear and present scene.
Exactly. So the distinction between seen and unseen isn't about what is real and what is imaginary. It's about the limitation of the observer.
That is a huge shift in perspective. It completely changes the definition of mystery. A mystery isn't something that's illogical or magical. It's just a matter of parallax. It's a matter of dimension.
It is dimension. The Quranic proposition, as Ahmed lays it out for us, is that reality is multidimensional. The physical, the atoms, the loom, that is what is called the seen, al-shahada. It is absolutely real. It follows laws. We should study it. But it is enveloped, it is surrounded, and it is permeated by a much larger metaphysical context. The unseen, Al-Ghaib.
So it's not a gap in the machine for God to fill.
No, not at all.
It's a fullness that the machine exists within.
Exactly. The materialist looks for God inside the machine, in the gaps between the gears, and triumphantly says, aha, I don't see him. The Quran perspective says, of course you don't. God isn't another gear in the machine. God is the reason there's a machine in the first place.
Which brings us to a specific piece of that machine that seems to give materialists the most trouble. The ghost in the machine, us, our own consciousness.
The self, yes.
The source material refers to this as the Ruh.
The Ruh. It's a word that's often translated as soul or spirit. But in this kind of philosophical context, it's probably best understood as consciousness itself. The I, the thing that is looking out from behind your eyes right at this moment.
Okay, let's go back to the materialist view for a second, just to set the stakes clearly. We talked about reductionism. Materialism has to say, you feel sad. That is nothing but serotonin depletion in your synapses. You see the color red. That is just a 650 nanometer wavelength of light hitting your retina, converting to an electrical signal and hitting your visual cortex.
Right, and that describes the mechanism of seeing perfectly. But it doesn't say anything at all about the experience of seeing. And this is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness.
The qualia, that subjective feeling.
The qualia, what it is like to be you. Think about the classic thought experiment, Mary's room.
The one about the color scientist.
Yes. So imagine a brilliant neuroscientist named Mary. Her whole life, she has lived in a completely black and white room. She has never, ever seen color. But she is the world's leading expert on the physics and neurology of color vision. She knows everything there is to know about wavelengths, retinas, and neurons. She knows that red is a 650 nanometer wavelength. She can write down the exact chemical reaction it triggers in the brain. She knows the physics perfectly.
But she's never actually seen the color red.
Never. Then one day, the door opens. She walks out of the room and sees a ripe red apple for the very first time. The question is, does she learn something new?
Of course she does. She learns what red looks like. She learns the experience of redness.
Exactly. And that proves that knowing the physics of red is not the same thing as the experience of red. The experience, the consciousness of it, is something extra, something that cannot be captured in a physical equation.
And the materialist has to ultimately say that that experience, that qualia, is just an illusion generated by the brain's computations.
And this is where the rationalist counter comes in. The expert in our source material introduces the concept of the Ruh, not as a product of the brain, but as a spark divine infused. He references the Quranic verse, and he breathed into him from my created soul.
Now, hold on a second. This sounds lovely. It's very poetic. But how do we grapple with this logically? Because as a skeptic, playing the empiricist here, I have to point out the obvious. We know for a fact that brain damage changes personality. We know drugs can alter consciousness completely. If I hit you on the head hard enough with a baseball bat, you stop being able to do calculus. You might even forget your own wife's name.
Right. That's a very powerful objection.
It really looks like the brain is doing all the work. So if this soul or Ru is separate, why does damaging the physical brain also damage the soul's expression?
That is probably the strongest argument for materialism. The correlation between brain states and mind states is, for all intents and purposes, 100%.
Yeah.
But, and this is a big but, correlation is not causation. And here, J.R. Ahmed uses what I honestly think is the core metaphor of the entire deep dive. It's the radio analogy.
I love this analogy. Let's walk through it slowly because I think it really gets to the heart of that objection.
Okay, so I want you to imagine a radio, a really high-tech, complex, high-fidelity receiver. It's sitting on a table in a room, and it's playing a beautiful Mozart symphony. You can hear the violins, the cellos. It's intricate and distinct music.
Okay, I see the radio. I can hear the music.
Now, suppose you are a Martian who has just landed on Earth. You've never seen a radio before. You have no concept of invisible radio waves. You just find this box that's making music. So you, being a good scientist, you open it up. You see wires, transistors, silicon chips, and you start messing with them.
I'm a curious Martian. I take my little Martian tool and I cut the blue wire.
And the violin suddenly stops.
Okay. So then I take a little Martian hammer and I smash the speaker cone.
And the beautiful music becomes a distorted, horrible static.
And finally I get frustrated and I pour my Martian coffee all over the motherboard.
The music dies completely. Silence.
So using my purely empirical materialist logic, I come to a conclusion. The box is making the music. The wires are generating the violins. The motherboard is the composer.
It is a perfectly logical conclusion based on all the evidence you have available to you. But is it true?
No, it's completely wrong. The music is a signal. It's being broadcast from a radio station miles and miles away. The box is it's a receiver.
Yeah.
It's modulating the signal, manifesting it into sound.
Precisely. The box is the instrument. The invisible signal is the source. Now, let's apply this directly to the brain and the Ru.
The brain is the hardware, the highly complex radio receiver.
And your consciousness, your sense of self, your Ru, is the invisible signal.
So if my brain gets damaged, if I get Alzheimer's disease or a severe concussion, the radio's broken. The signal gets distorted. I can't play my thoughts or my memories clearly anymore.
The music sounds terrible. Or, in the case of brain death, it stops altogether. But, and this is the absolute kicker, just because the radio breaks and the music stops, does that mean the signal has ceased to exist?
No. The signal is still in the air. The broadcast hasn't stopped. The receiver just isn't able to catch it and translate it anymore.
And this is the fundamental distinction the source makes. The brain is the instrument that the consciousness plays. The I is the actor. The brain is the violin. The I is the violinist.
This completely reframes the whole hard problem. It suggests that self-awareness, that identity that feels like it transcends the physical, is the observer of the brain's activity, not the product of it. It's the unique, irreducible center of individual being.
And this connects all the way back to that idea of Al-Ghaib. The signal is unseen. It's invisible. You can't weigh the radio signal. You can't catch it in a net. But without that invisible signal, the physical radio is just a useless doorstop.
It's a lot to process. Because what it really suggests is that we are, all of us, walking around as dual beings. We are a physical body and a non-physical essence, a receiver and a signal.
Which is, funnily enough, exactly the Quranic proposition. The source points to verses like, he created man from clay like that of pottery. That's the hardware, the receiver.
Yeah.
And he breathed into him from his spirit. That's the signal.
But this, of course, raises a massive question. If there is a signal, there has to be a broadcaster. There has to be a source for the broadcast.
And this brings us to the nature of the source itself, what the source material calls sovereign intelligence.
We really need to deconstruct the sky god image here, because I think when most materialists reject the idea of God, they're rejecting a very specific, almost cartoonish image. You know, the old man with the white jade sitting on a cloud, the Zeus figure, a super object who lives somewhere inside the universe.
Right. And the fascinating thing is that the source argues that the Quran rejects that image just as vehemently as the staunchest atheist does.
Really? How so?
Absolutely. The source immediately references Surah Al-Ikhlas, one of the shortest chapters in the Quran, which is a declaration of what God is not,
Right.
and neither begets nor is begotten. And crucially, there is none like unto him.
What does that actually mean in this philosophical context? There is none like him.
It means God is not a physical being in any sense. If God were a physical being, even a giant, super powerful one made of exotic energy, he would still be subject to the laws of physics. He would require space to exist in. He would be subject to the flow of time.
He would be just another part of the loom, a thread in the cosmic rug. Maybe a very shiny gold thread, but still just a thread.
Exactly. And the source argues that the creator of the loom cannot possibly be a thread in the loom. The painter of a masterpiece cannot be a dab of paint on the canvas. The author of the book cannot be a character in the story. He must be absolutely independent. The specific Arabic term used is as-samad.
As-samad.
It implies a perfect, eternal self-sufficiency, a reality that needs nothing outside of itself to exist, while everything else in existence needs it. And that logically implies non-physicality. If God created space and time, he cannot be bound by space and time. He must be transcendent.
So this is where the logic of non-physicality comes into play. The materialist says, I don't believe in God because I see no physical evidence of him in the universe. And the Quranic response, as presented here, is, well, of course you don't. You shouldn't expect to see the painter inside the painting.
You see the brushstrokes of the painter, you see the design, the colors, the composition, but you don't see the painter himself as just another patch of pigment.
This moves us very naturally to the concept of morality. Because if there is a broadcaster, a sovereign intelligence, does the broadcast have content? Does it have rules? Is there a point to the music?
This is where the source introduces the concept of architectural justice.
Architectural justice. That's a very specific, very evocative phrase.
It's meant to contrast sharply with the materialist social contract we discussed earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, in the closed room of materialism, morality is just an agreement we humans made up to stay alive. I won't kill you if you don't kill me.
Right. It's subjective. It's fragile. If we all agree tomorrow that killing is okay, then killing becomes moral for our society.
Exactly. If the Nazis win the war, and they successfully enforce a new social contract where genocide is the highest virtue, then genocide becomes moral by their definition. There is no higher court. There is no cosmic standard to appeal to.
Which is, frankly, terrifying.
It is the brutal, logical conclusion of a purely materialist universe. But in the Quranic worldview, because the entire system is designed by a sovereign intelligence, morality is architectural.
Meaning it's built into the structure of the thing, like the load-bearing walls of a house.
Meaning it's as real and as non-negotiable as gravity. Think about building a bridge. To build a successful bridge, you have to follow the laws of physics, right? If you ignore the principles of gravity and stress, the bridge collapses every time.
Right. Gravity doesn't care if you believe in it or not. It just is.
Now, apply that very same logic to morality. The source quotes the Quran. His is the creation and the command. The physical laws, gravity, thermodynamics, are his creation. The moral laws, justice, compassion, honesty, are his command. But they both originate from the exact same will, the same source.
So violating a moral law like committing an injustice or betraying a trust or being deceitful is, in a way, like trying to defy gravity. You might be able to jump up for a second, but you are inevitably going to come crashing down. It's not just a difference of opinion. It's a violation of the fundamental structure of reality.
Exactly. This creates an objective meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Justice isn't just a nice idea we invented. It's a property of the universe, sustained by its creator. When you lie, the source argues, you are creating static in your own signal. You are damaging your own receiver. You are fighting against the very architecture of your own being.
This is a perfect point to move into the synthesis. We've had the thesis, the materialist loom, the closed room. We've had the antithesis, the metaphysical signal, the unseen reality. How do we bring these two seemingly contradictory ideas together?
The source calls it the harmonized reality. And the conclusion isn't about rejecting science or the physical world. It's about elevating it, giving it a context it lacks on its own.
We finally get to see the whole thing, the tapestry revealed.
Yes. The text talks about embracing reality with two hands. The physical world exists. We grasp it. We know it. We should study it with all the rigor of science.
Yeah.
But the metaphysical depths, the unseen, are what give it meaning and purpose.
I found the concept of sustaining the order really beautiful here. The source argues that the universe isn't a wind-up clock that God built billions of years ago and then just walked away from, leaving it to run on its own.
No, that's deism. This is very different. The Quranic view presented is that God actively sustains each breath. The atoms continue to be atoms because he wills them to remain atoms, moment by moment by moment. The loom keeps weaving because he is the one actively powering the loom.
So science in this worldview becomes, what then is it, an adversary?
Not at all. Science becomes the study of the author's wisdom. When you study physics, you are studying the predictable ways that God usually acts. You are tracing the beautiful, consistent habits of the divine. It transforms the laboratory into a sanctuary. It turns the telescope from a tool of observation into a tool of worship.
It removes the conflict. You don't have to choose between the loom and the light. You realize you need the physical loom to manifest the pattern, and you need the metaphysical light to see and understand the pattern.
The physical exists, a truth we grasp and know. Yet metaphysical depths, their deeper meaning show. The two are not in conflict. They're two sides of the same reality.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've journeyed from a closed room of blind, meaningless atoms to a vast, multidimensional tapestry illuminated by a sovereign intelligence. We've looked at the human brain not as the generator of the self, but as a fine-tuned receiver for the soul.
And we've redefined the unseen Al-Ghaib not as a place of darkness or superstition, but as a place of boundless truths that are simply waiting to be encountered.
I want to leave you, our listener, with one final provocation, a thought experiment to carry with you as you go about your day.
Let's hear it.
Go back to that radio analogy one last time. You are the signal. Your physical body is the receiver. One day, inevitably, for every single one of us, the receiver will break down, the hardware will fail, the sound will stop. The question is, what happens to the signal when it is no longer constrained by the limitations of the hardware?
When the limitation of the receiver is removed.
Exactly. Does the music simply stop? Or, free from the static and the broken speaker and the faulty wiring, does it finally become perfectly clear?
That is the ultimate question of this deep dive, isn't it?
Thanks for listening.
Until next time.